Elias Vance had spent 47 years calculating stress and load. As a structural engineer, he had designed bridges that spanned mile-wide rivers, stadiums that held 50,000 screaming fans, and skyscrapers that pierced the clouds. He knew that every structure had its limits. Every beam would eventually crack. Every foundation would eventually shift. The key was knowing when to walk away. At 78 years old, Elias needed a full hip replacement. The arthritis had been grinding away at his bones for years, turning each step into a calculus of pain. The surgery was routine, the doctor said. 90% success rate, 6 weeks of recovery, then back to walking without a cane. Elias was not worried about the surgery. He was worried about the test. For 6 weeks before the operation, he watched his children. He studied them the way he had once studied blueprints, looking for the hairline fractures, the stress points, the places where the weight would eventually cause the structure to fail. Arthur was the eldest. 49 years old, successful on paper, empty inside. He had inherited Elias's ambition, but none of his integrity. Every conversation eventually turned to money. The value of the house, the stock portfolio, the estate planning that Arthur had been pestering him about for years. 46, divorced twice, perpetually busy with things that never seemed to matter. She had a gift for excuses, elaborate, creative, almost artistic in their construction. She could not come to dinner because her yoga retreat was starting. She could not visit because her therapist had recommended boundaries. She could not stay on the phone because her rescue dog was having an anxiety attack. Elena was the youngest. 43, single, perpetually broke despite a salary that would have supported a family of 4. She did not ask for money. She demanded it, rent, car payments, a busyness opportunity that was definitely not a pyramid scheme. Her calls always came at the worst possible moments, and they always ended with the same question. When are you going to distribute the inheritance? Elias had raised these 3 children alone after his wife Margaret passed away 15 years ago. He had worked 2 jobs to put Arthur through law school. He had co-signed loans for Serena's failed businesses. He had paid Elena's rent for 8 years. He had given them everything. And now, as he prepared to go under the knife, he found himself asking a question he had never dared to ask before. Faye, what have they ever given back? The surgery went perfectly. Elias woke up in a hospital room on the 4th floor, his hip throbbing, his head cloudy from anesthesia. A nurse named Claire was adjusting his IV, her hands gentle and efficient. "Welcome back, Mr. Vance," she said, smiling. "The doctor said everything went beautifully. You'll be up and walking in no time." Elias looked around the room. Pale blue walls, a window overlooking the parking lot, a television mounted on the ceiling, and next to his bed, a plastic chair, blue, uncomfortable, empty. Claire's smile faltered, just for a moment. "Not yet, but it is still early. I am sure they'll be here soon." They were not. She was in Sedona for a spiritual intensive and could not get away. The connection was bad. She sounded relieved. Day 3, Elena called. She spent 15 minutes talking about her landlord, her overdue rent, her car that needed new tires. She did not ask how Elias was feeling. She did not ask about the surgery. She asked when he would be back on his feet so she could borrow some money. Day 4. The blue chair remained empty. Day 5. Elias watched a man in the room across the hall receive visitors. His daughter, his son-in-law, 3 grandchildren who drew pictures on whiteboards and taped them to the window. The man was crying. Happy tears. Elias looked at his own window. No pictures, no grandchildren, no tears. Day 6. Claire brought him lunch and sat with him for a few minutes during her break. She asked about his work. He told her about the bridges, the stadiums, the skyscrapers. She listened like she actually cared. "Your children," Claire said carefully. "Are they far away?" Elias looked at the blue chair. "No," he said. "They're just busy." Day 7. Arthur called again. This time he wanted to talk about the house. The market was hot, he said. If Elias sold now, he could get top dollar. "You don't need a big place anymore, Dad. It is just you." Elias said nothing. Day 8. Serena sent a long email about her emotional journey and how she had come to terms with the fact that she was not a natural caregiver. She enclosed a link to a GoFundMe for her new meditation app. Day 9. Elena showed up. She stayed for 11 minutes. She did not sit in the blue chair. She stood by the door, holding her purse like she was afraid it might get stolen. She asked for $3,000 when Elias said no. She left. She did not say goodbye. Day 10. The blue chair was still empty. Day 11. Elias stopped, expecting anyone. Day 12. He started thinking about the house. Not about selling it, about the life he had built there. The garden Margaret had planted, the workshop where he had tinkered with clocks, the dining room where they had shared Thanksgiving dinners, back when the children still came home. Day 13. Claire helped him pack his things. She had brought him a small gift. A potted succulent, green and resilient, the kind of plant that could survive anything. "You have family, Mr. Vance," Claire said. It was not a question. Elias looked at the blue chair. One last time. "No," he said, "I don't." The taxi ride to Cedar Ridge took 40 minutes. Elias sat in the back seat, his new hip aching, his old suitcase on the seat beside him. He watched the city fade into suburbs, the suburbs into trees, the trees into the quiet street where he had lived for 30 years. Cedar Ridge, formerly Sycamore Lane. He had changed the name after Margaret died. She had always wanted to live on a street called Cedar Ridge. He had made it happen, the way he had made everything happen, quietly, without fuss, without expecting thanks. The house was dark when he arrived. No lights in the windows, no car in the driveway, no note on the door. He let himself in with his own key. He walked through the living room, the dining room, the kitchen. Everything was exactly as he had left it. The dishes in the sink, the mail on the counter, the photograph of Margaret on the mantel, smiling at him like she knew something he did not. He sat down in his old chair. The leather armchair he had bought 30 years ago. The one that had molded itself to his body over decades of reading and thinking and waiting. And then he called Marcus Vane. Marcus was not just his lawyer. He was his oldest friend. They had served in the army together 50 years ago, before either of them had become anything. Marcus had been the best man at his wedding. He had held Elias's hand at Margaret's funeral. He was the only person in the world who knew the full story of Elias Vance. Not the public story, but the real one. "Elias," Marcus said when he answered. "How are you feeling?" "Lonely," Elias said. "But that is not why I am calling." He told Marcus about the 13 days, about the blue chair, about Arthur's calls about the house, Serena's emails about her journey, Elena's 11-minute visit and her demand for money. Marcus listened without interrupting. When Elias finished, there was a long silence on the line. "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked. Elias looked around the room, at the photographs on the wall, at the shelves of books, at the clock that Margaret had wound every night before bed. "I want to teach them something," Elias said. "What lesson?" Elias thought about the bridges he had designed. The way they carried weight, the traffic, the wind, the rain, the years. The way they held together, not because any single beam was strong, but because every beam did its part. "I want to teach them what happens when no one shows up to bear the load," he said. "I want to teach them that inheritance and privileges can be revoked." Marcus understood. "You want to change your will." "I want to rebuild it," Elias said, "from the ground up. Over the next 6 weeks, Elias and Marcus worked together like architects designing a new building. The old will had been simple, everything divided equally among the three children: the house, the investment portfolio, the trust fund Margaret had set up before she died. All of it split three ways, no questions asked. The new will was different. "Leave nothing to Arthur," Marcus said. "He has his own money. He doesn't need yours." Elias shook his head. "It is not about need. It is about desert." He pulled out a yellow legal pad, the same kind he had used for decades, the same kind he had used to sketch the load calculations for a dozen major bridges, and began to write. The house sold at auction, proceeds donated to the veterans of foreign wars. The investment portfolio liquidated, 50% to the engineering scholars fund at the state university, 25% to the children's hospital, 25% to the local food bank. The trust fund dissolved, the remaining assets distributed to the charities Margaret had supported during her life: the library, the animal shelter, the community garden, the personal belongings, photographs, letters, Margaret's jewelry, to be boxed and stored. If the children wanted them, they could ask. If they did not ask within 1 year, everything would be donated. Elias looked at what he had written: 3 children, 30 years of sacrifice, and not a single dollar in the new will. "Are you sure?" Marcus asked. Elias thought about the blue chair, the empty blue chair. The chair that had sat beside his hospital bed for 13 days, waiting for someone to sit in it. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," he said. Marcus filed the documents. The new will was signed, witnessed, notarized, and locked in the safe at Marcus's office. Elias went back to Cedar Ridge. He tended the garden. He read books. He wound Margaret's clock every night before bed, and he waited. 6 weeks after the surgery, the children came home. It was not a coincidence. Elias had sent them a letter handwritten, formal, the kind of letter a man writes when he has something important to say. "Dear Arthur, Serena, and Elena, *Fahai, have recovered from my surgery. I have been doing a great deal of thinking about the future. I would like you to join me for dinner at the house on Saturday, the 14th of October, at 6 p.m. I will be making your mother's cornbread casserole. *Fay your father, *Fay Elias Fay." They arrived separately, each one carrying a gift. Arthur brought a bottle of expensive wine, the kind he would probably drink most of himself. He walked through the front door like he was evaluating a property, his eyes scanning the walls, the floors, the ceilings. "Place is looking good, Dad," he said. "Have you thought any more about selling?" Elias smiled. "Let's eat first." Serena arrived next, carrying a potted orchid and a long story about her healing journey. She hugged Elias like she meant it, but her eyes were already drifting toward the dining room, toward the china cabinet, toward the silver. "I've been doing so much work on myself, Dad," she said. "I've really come to understand the importance of family." Elena was last as always. She brought nothing. She apologized for being late, traffic, parking, something about a friend who needed help moving. She sat down at the table without being invited and immediately started talking about her financial struggles. "It is just so hard right now, Dad. Everything is so expensive. I don't know how people survive." Elias said nothing. He went into the kitchen and brought out the cornbread casserole. Margaret's recipe, the one she had learned from her grandmother, the one that had been passed down through 4 generations. They ate, they talked, they performed. Arthur talked about his latest business deal, the one that was going to make him even more comfortable. Serena talked about her spiritual awakening, the one that had somehow not made her a kinder person. Elena talked about her money problems, the ones that always seemed to follow her wherever she went. And Elias watched. He watched the way Arthur's eyes lingered on the furniture, calculating its value. He watched the way Serena touched the silverware, imagining it on her own table. He watched the way Elena glanced at the door, already planning her exit. They were not here for him. They had never been here for him. They were here for the house, for the money. for the inheritance. They were here to perform. And Elias, the old engineer who had spent his life calculating loads and stresses, watched the performance and felt nothing but peace. Because he knew what they did not. The blueprints had been redrawn, the load had been redistributed, and the structure they thought they were inheriting was already gone. After dinner, Elias led them into the living room. He sat in his old leather armchair, the one that had held him for 30 years, and looked at his 3 children. Arthur was standing by the fireplace, pretending to admire the photographs on the mantel. Serena was on the couch, scrolling through her phone. Elena was by the window, looking out at the street, already bored. "I wanted to tell you all," Elias said, "that I've finally sorted out my affairs." 3 heads turned, 3 sets of eyes sharpened with interest. "Your mother's will, the house, the investments, everything." Elias smiled. "It has all been taken care of." Arthur cleared his throat. "Taken care of how, Dad?" "Legally," Elias said. "Marcus Vane helped me. Everything is documented. Everything is signed. There will be no confusion when I am gone." Serena put down her phone. That is wonderful, Dad. We're so glad you are being responsible." Elena nodded enthusiastically. "Yeah, Dad. That is great. So when do we get the details?" Elias looked at her, at all of them. "You'll get them when I am dead," he said. "Not before." The room went quiet. Arthur's smile froze. Serena's eyes narrowed. Elena's mouth opened, then closed. "But Dad," Elena said, "don't you think we should know? I mean, for planning purposes?" Elias leaned back in his chair. He looked at the window, at the red cardinal that had been visiting the bird feeder every morning for the past 3 years. "No," he said. "I don't think you should know. I think you should wait. Like I waited." He did not say it angrily. He did not say it bitterly. He said it the way he had said everything else that evening, calmly, quietly, without drama. The children exchanged glances. They did not understand. They could not understand. They had spent their entire lives believing that the world owed them something, that their father's hard work was their birthright, that the blue chair would always be there when they needed it. They did not know that the blue chair had been empty for 13 days. They did not know that the load had finally broken the structure. They did not know that the inheritance they were counting on no longer existed. "One more thing," Elias said. "I've decided not to sell the house. Not yet. I am going to stay here, alone, for as long as I can." Arthur's face fell. "But Dad, the market will wait," Elias interrupted. "So will I." "Thank you for coming," he said. "The door is that way." Elias Vance lived another 8 years. He never sold the house. He never distributed the inheritance. He never explained his decision to his children, though they asked. Sometimes politely, sometimes angrily, sometimes with tears. Arthur stopped calling after the first year. He had decided that his father was senile, that the will would be contested, that the money would eventually be his. He was wrong on all counts. Serena sent occasional emails, always asking for something, a loan, a signature, a connection. Elias replied to none of them. Elena never visited again. She had decided that her father was selfish, that he had abandoned her, that he was hoarding wealth that rightfully belonged to his children. She told this story to anyone who would listen. The children did not come to the funeral. Marcus Vane arranged it. Claire, the nurse from the hospital, came. A few neighbors, a few old friends from the engineering firm. The red cardinal sat on the bird feeder and watched the mourners gather. After the service, Marcus read the will. Arthur, Serena, and Elena sat in the front row of the lawyer's office, their faces tight with anticipation. They had spent 8 years waiting for this moment. They had imagined it 1,000 times. The numbers, the percentages, the division of the spoils. Marcus opened the document and began to read. "The house at Cedar Ridge will be sold at public auction. Proceeds will be donated to the veterans of foreign wars. Arthur's face went white. The investment portfolio will be liquidated. 50% will go to the Engineering Scholars Fund at the State University, 25% to the Children's Hospital, 25% to the local food bank. Serena started to cry, not from grief, from rage. The trust fund established by Margaret Vance will be dissolved. Remaining assets will be distributed to the following charities. Elena stood up. "This is a mistake," she said. "This can't be right." Marcus looked at her over his reading glasses. "It is right. I witnessed it." Mr. Vane was of sound mind when he signed. "But we're his children," Serena said. He can't just leave us nothing." Marcus closed the document and set it on the desk. "He didn't leave you nothing," Marcus said. "He left you exactly what you gave him." 13 days, Marcus said. "He waited for you in that hospital room for 13 days. The chair beside his bed was empty the entire time. Not one of you sat in it. Not one of you held his hand. Not one of you asked how he was feeling." Arthur opened his mouth to argue. "He told me about the calls," Marcus continued, "about the questions about the house, about the excuses, about the demands for money. He told me everything." The room was silent. "Your father was a structural engineer," Marcus said. "He spent his life calculating loads and stresses. He knew that every structure has a breaking point, and he watched you three test his limits for 13 days. He stood up and walked to the window. The blue chair was empty, he said, and that emptiness told him everything he needed to know. The children left the office separately. They did not speak to each other. They did not speak to Marcus. They walked out into the afternoon sun and disappeared into the city, each one carrying the weight of what they had lost. None of them ever understood. They could not understand. They had spent their whole lives taking, never giving, never once considering that love was not a transaction but a load, a weight that had to be carried by everyone, not just one tired old man sitting alone in a hospital room. Elias Vance was buried next to his wife in the small cemetery behind the church. The headstone was simple. His name, a single line from a poem Margaret had loved. Asterisks they also serve who only stand and wait. Asterisk, and on the mantel of the empty house, waiting for the auctioneers and the strangers and the new family that would one day fill its rooms, the clock that Margaret had wound every night before bed ticked on, measuring the hours, counting the days, witnessing the silence.